Paul Harris filling in for McGraw all week long. Kelly Jackson is here with me, and Aaron Kontersky is going to join us now from New York to talk a little bit about a big deal that came down yesterday for former NFL players. I have been talking for the last couple of years about the NFL's concussion crisis and its impact not only on the players but their families. We've heard the sad stories of superstars like Junior Seau and Dave Duerson, who had traumatic brain injury, which wasn't really discovered until after their death, but they had erratic lives, mostly because their brains were banged against their skulls from the inside so many times and so many hard hits out on the field. For so long, the NFL covered up the science. Greg Easterbrook wrote a terrific book about this called The King of Sports, and the Wada brothers wrote wonderful stories for ESPN and also a book of their own about the NFL and how it had ignored and covered up this concussion crisis. Then last year we heard that there was a settlement between the league and some former players, but a judge rejected that earlier this year and just yesterday approved a new settlement. So Aaron Kontersky is here to fill us in on that. Good morning, Aaron.
Well, good morning. This settlement comes just 2 weeks. The approval of the settlement comes just 2 weeks after the NFL agreed to drop a cap on compensation awards of about $675 million. The judge had worried there wouldn't be enough money to cover potentially 18,000 retired players for the next 65 years. She wasn't convinced of the NFL's math. And so the NFL said, fine, we'll drop the cap. We'll pay whatever it is, whatever claims are deemed eligible for the next 65 years. And now the players are free to go ahead and accept the terms or reject them.
Now, this includes about 5,000 former players who were part of this class action suit. But I understand there are a lot more who are not part of it, who are really looking at this and deciding, is this really going to help them and cover them going forward, right?
And there are real questions. Some of the retired players say that there are not enough ailments covered. Some say that it's not going to give them enough money based on the formula for each ailment, depending on what they have. Some say that it's just too slow a process. Some say the NFL's getting off cheap, no matter what they end up paying for $1 billion a year enterprise. $800 million, $900 million, $1 billion even over 65 years is chump change.
You said $1 billion a year. It's actually more like a $10 billion a year business, the National Football League. And how much are we talking about for individual players here? Is there an amount that each retired player can be guaranteed?
There is, depending on what it is that they have. So if they have ALS, it's one amount. If they have some other kind of brain trauma, it's another amount. It depends on the severity of their case, and each case would be, assuming the players opt in, would be handled individually.
So how are they going to handle that? Is the NFL going to have to set up some special office that is going to handle these claims?
Well, there's going to have to be a pot of money, and then, there would be a whole evaluation process for the retired players to see when they can start getting some of their checks. And it's not terribly arduous. It's not like it's going to take years. But there will be, some evaluation, and then the checks can go out, and those checks are supposed to last for the next 65 years to cover all of these retired players and future retired players up to a point.
Now, what happens if a guy played in the NFL, say, 5 years ago, and he hasn't? He had concussions while he played. It's almost impossible to be an NFL player. I think you'd have to be a punter or a place kicker to avoid concussions in the NFL. Everybody else bangs heads so often that they've all got to have it. But let's say a guy played 4 or 5 years ago, and the symptoms of that concussion haven't really become apparent yet. Is there a time period in which he can file a claim?
Depending on when you retire, no. I mean, you can opt into and apply for some kind of compensation as long as you retire. I think it covers retired players up through 2016. I have to double check, but there's some allocation for future retired players. And then whenever their symptoms develop, they can apply for compensation. But that's one of the controversies. I mean, what if their symptoms don't develop for 20 years down the road? Will there still be enough money there, and will the league still be willing to cover them? A lot of players may believe that their best option still resides in the court system, but it's going to be a tall order to sue the NFL to prove what needs to be proved to make those cases successful.
I mentioned Dave Duerson, one of the guys who caught traumatic brain injury. His family's lawyer says that the $2.2 million they would be projected to get under this settlement was nowhere near adequate. What's been the reaction from other former NFLers?
It's hardly homogenous. Some say finally the league is going to pay up, and that's what we heard from the lead plaintiffs' attorneys, that the settlement is the best option for retired players. The judge even called the proposed settlement a significant improvement over what was presented several months ago. Other retired players say it just doesn't account for all of the types of brain injuries that are out there among retired players, and doesn't hold the league accountable enough.
Yeah, the league does not admit any responsibility for this,
no,
right?
They do not. And there's some fairly serious accusations. One, that it was the repeated hard hits over the course of a playing career that led to these brain trauma, to these brain injuries and potential long-term neurological problems, that the NFL knew about the risks and failed to warn the players, actively ignored the evidence, and failed to pass on the information to players so they could make a choice. The league never has admitted guilt. In fact, it strongly denied it, and says it has been working hard on stemming the violence from the game. But of course, they're not going to get rid of it entirely, because I think if you have to be honest about it, that's why people watch it.
Absolutely. One of the reasons that you see that is, the hard hits that are out there, although I do know that NFL Network and NFL.com, both at the beginning of the last season, announced that they were going to be cutting down on the hard hit videos. The NFL Films videos that always came out every year with the guys, the wide receiver making the amazing catch over the middle and getting crushed by a safety or a cornerback.
And look, that's part of the game's appeal, isn't it? And the NFL capitalized on that. And that was one of the arguments that the plaintiffs' attorneys made. They said that the NFL got to be the $10 billion a year business that it is, in part on the back of the violent hits that are now causing so much in the way of traumatic brain injury. You talk to some retired players, and they'll say, that's what we signed up for. That's what we knew the risks. We didn't have to be told the risks. Other retired players say it went beyond just a warning, that they were put in the game with a concussion, and it was just covered up, and doctors were enablers in all of this. And so some of the resentment toward the league runs very, very deep.
Yeah. Aaron, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Aaron Concussion in New York. One of the interesting parts of this story is the impact it is supposed to have had on youth sports. And we've actually seen the number of kids playing Pop Warner football drop off about 9 or 10% in the last couple of years while this controversy has been going on. But ESPN has a new report out now from the National Federation of State High School Associations that says that the number of high school football players has only gone down 2% in the last 5 years. I wondered when the NFL concussion crisis story began a couple of years ago if it was going to make parents say, wait a second, I don't want my kid's head banged around the way Jim McMahon's was. Jim McMahon, the famous quarterback from the Super Bowl shuffle years of the Chicago Bears, now suffering from dementia. He's been doing some interviews about this. You see him or a guy like Tony Dorsett or any former NFL star who is in bad shape now. And I'm not talking about our friend Dan Deerdorf, watching him walk down the hall with his legs, hobbled by those years of the NFL. That's one thing. And I've asked Dan, did he ever have any dementia or other problems from this? And he says, no, I'm lucky. I'm one of the few that didn't develop that sort of stuff. But when you see that, I know that there were parents in this country who had a lot of second thoughts about putting their kid in that helmet and sending him out onto that field. As much as you may love football yourself and your kid may love football, when you see the long-term effects that can come from that, the NFL lying about it for all those years and covering up its effects may have had a real detrimental effect to a lot of younger players who never got there but played when they were in Pop Warner or in high school or in college ball. But interestingly, in the last 5 years, the numbers of high school football players have only come down 2%. We'll see how that story proceeds.